Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank Dan and his MedTech conference team for hosting this conference and allowing my company called Eyenuk to present. Eyenuk has developed an artificial intelligence and AI-based automated retinal imaging analysis software platform that is focused on early disease detection. My name is Kevin Skoll, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development and Corporate Alliances. I joined the company about 8 months ago and was very excited to do so because it's one of the first times I really have a passion for it because it affects me personally. I have a mom who's 78 years old, clinically obese, a type 2 non-compliant diabetic. Every time she raises that can of Coca-Cola and takes a drink, I see you're going to potentially lose a limb or potentially affect your eyesight. Well, Eyenuk is doing its share to try to provide care to those patients who are part of this diabetic epidemic. Just a quick note, everything you'll see today, the products are not approved in the US, they're for investigational uses only. So we have a platform technology. Again, we've heard a lot of these words. It's based on machine learning, computer vision, image analysis algorithms. It's all about improving screening. It's about improving screening and early detection of disease at the point of care. So without any human grading and being fully automated. So we're really taking advantage of two trends here in healthcare. And one is science is there that the earlier you detect disease, the better off the patient's going to be for any kind of treatment. So not waiting the 2 or 3 years when that patient actually goes to the specialist, do it at the point of care. And having a tool like Eyenuk and Eyenuk allows that to happen. The other trend is the science is really catching up on using the eye, your retina, as it is the only organ that allows for non-invasive viewing and imaging of the microvasculature. So really taking a peek into a person's health, first in eye diseases and downstream more in chronic conditions like cardiovascular, hypertension, stroke, and Alzheimer's. So our focus right now is on the eye diseases, diabetic retinopathy, macular degeneration, and glaucoma. Obviously, it affects millions of patients around the world, so very large markets. The problem is that someone else mentioned it earlier today, that there's not enough specialists, not enough ophthalmologists to do all the screening that's needed for the 30 million diabetics patients in the US. At the same time, the primary care folks don't have the tools to do the adequate diagnosis. So Eyenuk is stepping in to create artificial intelligence software platform that allows for disease screening, diagnosis, monitoring via retinal imaging analysis at the point of care. So the first application is Eyenuk. Right behind it is AMD for macular degeneration, IC glaucoma for glaucoma. Maybe the killer app really though is iDiff and iMark, where we're going to be able to take 10 different images at 10 different time points and track the disease progression longitudinally. So this really bodes well for our business model because it's cloud-based. So after Eyeyuk's implemented at various providers or health systems, you can then seamlessly and remotely add the other applications, including for AMD, glaucoma, et cetera. In terms of the business model, it's a revenue share per-click business model where there are codes for fundus photography for doing the diagnosis. So as soon as the doctor clicks to send it up to the cloud, reimbursement is generated and there's a agreed upon profit share between Eyenuk and the provider group. Everyone always wants to know about the technology. Obviously, it's dealing with advanced algorithm solutions. It's patented. It's proprietary. What I can tell you, though, is very patient-focused. It's based on the international severity scales for diabetic retinopathy. It also is built to be robust. So it's built to be in real-life settings. So taking all images as those patients come, because that's how the real world happens. Sometimes people, when they train their algorithms, they'll try to get the perfect images, perfectly centered, very clean and pristine. Well, that's not going to happen in the real world. You need to be able to develop your algorithm such that even if the technician sends in an external eye image, it doesn't trip up the system, which sometimes happens. We're also camera agnostic, so any quality image that's taken by a decent camera can actually be used in our particular system. So what is the problem? The problem is that screening rates for diabetes is only 50–60% when the AAO and ADA recommend every diabetic patient have an annual eye exam. And the problem is that the diabetic patient goes sees their primary care physician and they do the various tests, but they can't do the eye screening. So they send them off to an ophthalmologist. Problem with diabetic retinopathy, there's no symptoms until it's too late. So the patient says, oh, my eyesight's fine, forget it, I'm not going to go do the screening. Or to see an ophthalmologist, it takes another 2 to 6 months, more time off of work, another figure out how to get transported to the actual office, and so they just say forget it. And even if they do get to the ophthalmologist, that information isn't fed back to the actual provider. So all through the system, there are cracks that the patients fall through and they're not getting their screening, which is the result of diabetic retinopathy being the leading cause of blindness in working age adults. So what Eyenuk has done is improve the workflow. So the patient goes to see their primary care physician. He sees the technician or the nurse when they do their actual vitals. You take a macular-centered image, and then you also take an optic nerve-centered image. There's no dilation. You may have to do blood pressure in between so your eyes redilate. But then they click a button on the software program, and they send the images up to the cloud, and within 60 seconds later, you have your report back, which then the nurse can give to the doctor, and the doctor brings into when they sees the patient, and there's a very fine point of education to change that patient's behavior, because they're actually going to look at the patient's images of their own eyes and see the progression of their disease. I always say there's nothing more powerful than looking at tumor regression or progression. Same thing with diabetic retinopathy. The patient can see the progression of the disease, along with having big red letters that patient should be referred. It's pretty impactful in increasing compliance rates. In addition, the provider also checks the box for meeting their quality measure, either a HEDIS or 5-star ratings, et cetera. As I said, we are very much focused on our business model being clinical-based. A really great story that we did was with the NHS UK, the Moorfields Eye Hospital. So the UK has like 80% screening rates. They're off the charts for the rest of the world. Why a single-payer system argument? Well, they just have a great process set up that all their patients are screened annually for diabetic retinopathy. So they realize, even with that great system and being the leaders outside the US, that it's still an inefficient process and not scalable, that they have to manually grade all these patients' images. So what they did is they held an independent head-to-head competition, public, with all the leading automated software programs that were out there, and they fed 20,000 or more patient cases through the various systems, and we came out on top, which was a great story for us. Our sensitivity was over 94% for referable DR and 99.6% for proliferative DR, meaning if you had any advanced progression of diabetic retinopathy, the system would pick it up. Another quick story is with our partner IPAX, who treats vulnerable patient populations largely in the Southwest. They had a 100-patient case study which resulted in 800,000 images in over 404 different clinics, and they fed all those images into our system, so you can imagine the amount of variability with camera types along with image quality. And even with that particular system, we came in the low 90%. To give you a basis line, most human graders, ophthalmologists, the average, if you're about 85% sensitivity, you're kind of in the sweet spot. We have some great collaborators. I mentioned the NHS UK. We're actually screening essentially the whole country of Armenia. We started the project last fall. IPAX, I just mentioned, we have some good work going on with LA County Department of Health and Washington University St. Louis. For regulatory, we actually have an ongoing FDA trial. So very careful to say that we're investigation use only. It's going to be a class 2 device, a de novo, so there's no predicate. So we're really pushing the boundaries of the FDA of deciding, what that clinical trial should look like. So we're nearly 15 different centers. We'll have about 1,000 patients when we're finished. Hopefully enrollment completes here end of Q2, early Q3, and we'll get on the market this time next year. We're approved in Europe. We expect Canadian approval here in Q1. And we also are, certified our quality management system, including actually having gone through the whole MDSAP process, which will give you certification for Canada, Australia, US, Brazil, and Japan. The leadership team, I don't like talking about myself, so I'll focus on the CEO, Kaushal Solanki. So his whole career has been based on machine learning, artificial intelligence. He had worked for the Department of Defense with satellite and drone imaging, looking at hotspots in enemy territories to actually take out. At the same time, his dad came down with some eye afflictions, and he thought, maybe I should use my knowledge and apply this to something to improve humanity. So he switched and started the company in roughly late 2010, and he's really grown the company the right way. Most of the funding to date has been through 6 or 7 NIH grants, raising about $8 million, and there's very little outside money that has been there to date. Currently, though, looking at a small mezzanine round financing before we do our true Series A here at the end of the year. I won't go over the summary again, as I've already mentioned, but again, we're technology, clinically, and regulatory de-risked. But a powerful statement by one of the leading KOLs in the ophthalmology space, Dr. Sada from the Doheny Eye Institute, believes it's time for an automated, reliable diabetic retinopathy screening tool. Systems such as IART would empower primary care providers to manage their patients with diabetes, thereby actually freeing up the ophthalmologists to then see the worst of the worst patients who, they prefer to see who they prefer to see to do more of the complicated procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, very much.